You've heard of the expression, the calm before the storm. That's all about weather, I believe. But what about the storm before the calm? This is what needs to happen in order for groups to perform at their best. It's an idea that we come together, we form, and then we storm, we have some sort of conflict, and then we finally get to the norming stage, which is where things settle down and we start working together collaboratively. And finally, we get to this stage of performing. So we've got to go through the storm before the calm. Okay? That's what we're talking about on today's episode. Hello, welcome to episode 104 of CRE Success, the podcast. My name is Darren Krakowiak, and I'm here to help commercial real estate leaders to develop their people and to grow their business. Now, I think you're going to enjoy today's show. We're going to be talking about whether leaders are born or made. So if you don't believe that you are a natural born leader, I'm going to give you some ideas on how you can outshine natural born leaders. And also, if you work on a team, and that's most people who are not working always by themselves, I'm going to be sharing some ideas about how teams can perform better. And specifically, I'm going to be sharing a story which may sound like a bit of a low point in my leadership journey, but it actually turned out to be an inflection point from where things started to improve for me in this particular environment that I was in. So that forming, storming, norming, performing idea that I told you about at the top of the show is going to be very relevant when you do hear me recount this story. Once again, this week, I'm asking Whitney Sewell to be our moderator for our discussion. Whitney is the host of the Real Estate Syndication show, and I'm going to hand over to him now to get us started with the first question.
Do you believe that you mentioned a little bit earlier, but you believe other people can be a natural leader, or do you feel like, it's more times than not, it's a learned skill, where someone's taking action on self-improvement, or are some people just more natural than others?
I think some people are more natural than others, but I think everyone can be better at it if they decide to. And I believe that an unnatural leader can be a better leader than a natural leader if a natural leader doesn't have any intention or decision to be a good leader, and a person who's perhaps not as predisposed to leadership actually decides that, hey, this is something that I want to get good at. So yes, there are natural leaders, but that doesn't in itself mean that you're going to be a good leader. I think it's more about the intent and the decision to, leadership is not about you, it's about the people you lead. And so if you're willing to take on that responsibility and also make part of your career and part of your role about other people, then that's going to go a long way to making you a better leader than just having some of those attributes which people associate with, strong or natural leadership.
I love that. You just said being a leader, it's not about you, it's about the people you're leading. That tells you a lot about if someone's going to be a good leader or not, I believe, right? It's how they interact with everyone, like you're talking about so much. And you mentioned, do they exhibit your core values and emotional intelligence, self-control, those things. And you and I talked briefly before we started recording too, just like the way you relate to others will ultimately determine your success. Elaborate on that a little bit. And obviously it's what we're talking about too, as being a leader, right? But, go a little more in depth about that.
I think if you're a commercial real estate agent, if you're an investor, people want to see people succeed if they like that person. If they don't like that person, then they're not cheering you on from the sidelines. Now, again, that doesn't mean that you have to be the most liked person, but I think being friendly and cooperative and likable can go a long way to making others more predisposed to want to help you, or at least to not be inclined to deliberately go out of the way to be unhelpful. So understanding the importance of people skills and being that type of person that other people want to see succeed, or at least are happy to see succeed. Like if you're that person who is going to be promoted into a role and then there's going to be an uproar because you've been promoted into that role, then you're going to have difficulties continuing to get promoted and continuing to advance in your organization. If you're an agent or an investor and some people just don't feel like they want to give you a leg up, then they will look for reasons and ways to sort of not include you in the process, or at least they'll be favoring other people who they can prefer to deal with because they sort of like dealing with that other person better. So, people are people, right? People want to deal with others who make them feel comfortable and who they have some affinity to. So it's important, I think, even if you're not naturally a people person, to at least put some effort and intention behind the way that you relate with others. And probably that's something that, even though I'm an extrovert, being likable and agreeable and cooperative is something that doesn't necessarily come naturally to me. So it's something that I've had to, work a little bit harder at in order to make sure that, people are happy to refer me work, that people are happy to recommend me or write me a testimonial or to continue to work with me. I want to make sure that there's nothing on the personal side of interacting with me that would stop people from doing that. And if I'm doing that and I'm, doing work to the best of my ability and making sure that I'm doing what I say I will do and I'm delivering what I promise to deliver, then, unless someone's just way better than me, then there's not really any reason why I can't be successful.
Mm. Give the listeners and I just some of those actionable steps maybe that would help us, that you could say, okay, today you can start doing this thing or two things or three, whatever it is, that would help us to work our way to becoming a better leader. And, for not only ourselves, but obviously for the people we lead, right? Our teams that we have on board right now.
So I think understanding from a leadership perspective, a few things I ask people that I'm working with to understand is, where are we going? Why are we going there? And how will we know when we've arrived? So just having a clear idea about sort of where you want to take things, a pathway towards getting there in terms of, how you're going to get there and why it matters, right? So it has to be more than just making money. There needs to be a bit of a story behind it to motivate people and to bring people along in the journey. And then how will we know that we'll get there is just the benchmarks. And it's just, how are we going to measure success? Well, we'll know we'll get there when we've done this, or when we're starting to attract this type of client, or when we've achieved this level of production or revenue. So I think being able to know where you want to go, to understand why it matters and communicate that with others is a really sort of important thing from a leadership perspective. I forget what the other part of the question was though, Whitney. So apologies if
it's just some actionable steps for us to, help improve our leadership skills today, for the listener and myself, just to benefit us and our entire team.
Yeah, I think probably understanding emotional intelligence as well. So understanding how you're perceived by others, thinking about the way that other people see you and the way that your behavior impacts others is really important. And that's all about, empathy. It's about, it's controlling your behaviors to make sure that you're not impacting other people in a negative way. So yeah, it's self-control, it's self-awareness, it's empathy. It's those sort of elements of emotional intelligence.
Can you speak to a time when maybe your leadership was questioned or challenged in some way, and how to handle that?
Yeah, so probably about less than a year into my tenure at CBRE, and this was in South Korea, which is a very hierarchical culture. And I took on that role when I was 35 years old. So people in the industry and people who were older than me had issues with the fact that I was in that role. And I guess I did still have the reputation of being a bit of a hothead, even though I had done some work on my own sort of anger management, but I was still seen as quite an aggressive person and maybe someone who was too aggressive and, we need to do things in a different way in Korea and that's not the right style and whatever. And I guess a lot of people who weren't happy with the fact that I had been given that position were still looking for ways to agitate me and looking to see if they could poke and prod me to see if they could get a rise out of me. And for the most part, I didn't give them that opportunity. But I remember there was one occasion where I was in a meeting and somebody wasn't listening, and I indicated to them that I wanted them to listen to the conversation with a little bit more focus, and that person didn't follow my instructions or my request. And I got quite angry at them and I swore at them, which is probably not something that you would do in Korea. I think in a Western culture, if your boss swore at you, it wouldn't be the end of the world. But in Korea, it's, oh God, he swore at us. And so it was this big thing, and they made a complaint and all of this sort of stuff. And I think outside of Korea, my boss was like, what's this about? Who cares? But I could actually see what the bigger deal was, because probably it was something that typically a boss wouldn't do. And it probably was what they were looking for in terms of what they'd heard about me or what they thought was their problem with me. So I really did let myself down by giving them that rise. But I think it was also the little bit of, it sort of broke some of the tension. I think something sort of had to boil to the surface. And funnily enough, after that incident, things got a lot better. So that was the thing that kind of brought us all a bit closer together in a way, because, we sort of had it out a bit and then we moved forward and, we achieved some really great things. So that's the one that comes to mind. Although I've never told that story before, so I apologize if it wasn't a very clear story.
No, it's okay. It's just interesting to hear, and it's great that you learned, you grew from that, and hopefully we can all do that as those things happen, because they're bound to.